What if the world you live in, the clean streets, the predictable supply chains, the steady glow of light at night, was never built for your freedom but for your obedience? What if what you've always called order was simply the most elegant form of control? There was a time before electricity, before skyscrapers, before Wall Street became the beating heart of global finance. In that time, oil wasn't power yet. It was potential. Thick, black, stubborn potential. Buried beneath Pennsylvania soil, waiting to be summoned. And when it was, it didn't rise peacefully. It exploded into the American landscape with chaos. Wildcatters fought over wells, refineries burned, markets collapsed, railroads demanded bribes. There were no rules, only profit and the ruthless men chasing it. Then came a man who didn't raise his voice, who didn't gamble, who didn't lose. John D. Rockefeller. He walked into the oil industry like a surgeon entering an operating room, quiet, precise, cold. Where others saw opportunity, he saw disarray. Where others celebrated competition, he saw waste. He didn't want a slice of the market. He wanted the whole system, not to destroy it, but to bring it under control. His control. He believed in God, he believed in numbers, and he believed that chaos was a sin. In his mind, to consolidate was moral, to dominate was rational. And to eliminate his rivals wasn't just business, it was purification. He didn't build an empire with bullets. He built it with rebates, contracts, and silence. He became the shadow behind the pipeline, the invisible hand that lit your lamp at night and balanced the ledgers of an entire economy while you slept. And somehow, we let him. Tonight, we walk the corridors of that empire. We trace the outlines of a legacy still carved into the foundations of modern capitalism. And we ask a question we were never supposed to ask. Was Rockefeller a genius who brought order to chaos, or a tyrant who taught the world how to rule without ever raising his voice? To understand Rockefeller is to understand the world that birthed him, a world swollen with ambition, yet paralyzed by chaos. After the Civil War, the United States was not simply rebuilding, it was transforming. Cities swelled with smoke and noise, railroads ripped through mountains, and industry, still in its infancy, began to stretch its limbs like something waking from a long sleep. But there was a problem. The economy wasn't efficient, it was wild. The oil industry in particular was a mess of overlapping ambitions. Wells were drilled without planning, refineries were built overnight, then abandoned weeks later. Prices rose and collapsed without warning. There was no map, no order, just a frenzy. Kerosene, refined from crude oil, was quickly becoming the lifeblood of modern life. It lit homes, it powered factories, but with no one steering the ship, the market flailed. Oversupply crashed prices, sudden shortages sparked panic. Everyone was racing, but no one was in control. Into that chaos stepped a man who saw clearly what others did not. John Davison Rockefeller didn't come with oil-stained hands or a gambler's grin. He came with ledgers, with restraint, with purpose. Born in 1839 in rural New York, the son of a traveling con man, he learned early that trust was dangerous and control was everything. While his father sold fake cures on the road, young John kept the family books. He tithed every penny he earned. He walked to work instead of paying for a carriage. He was not flamboyant, he was exact. And when he looked at the oil industry, he didn't see opportunity. He saw sin, waste, disorder. And in that disorder, he found his calling, not to compete, but to correct. Not to join the chaos, but to end it. He believed that markets should be rational, efficient, and clean. He believed that scattered efforts were inherently immoral, so he decided to impose order on an industry that had never known it. In 1865, he purchased his first refinery in Cleveland. It was not the largest, it was not the most profitable, but it was the first piece of a much larger design. Quietly, without spectacle, Rockefeller began building a machine that would remove uncertainty, crush inefficiency, and absorb everything around it. To others, it looked like business, but to him, it was destiny. And like all men of destiny, he moved without hesitation. He didn't just want to sell oil, he wanted to orchestrate its entire existence, from the moment it left the ground to the instant it burned in someone's lamp. And to do that, he would have to do something no one else dared: make the industry his. What Rockefeller built was not just a business. It was an architecture, one that reshaped not only the oil industry, but the very idea of capitalism. It began with a simple belief that chaos was wasteful and waste was immoral. And so he did what others feared: he made the market obey. He started with Cleveland. In 1872, he orchestrated what later came to be known as the Cleveland Massacre. Not a massacre of blood, but of competition. Through quiet negotiations, secret freight rebates, and relentless calculation, he absorbed nearly every refinery in the city within weeks. Competitors didn't fall because he crushed them. They fell because he outlasted them, outpriced them, and offered to buy them before the market did worse. He had help, namely from the railroads. Rockefeller secured hidden shipping discounts that no rival could match. Every barrel of oil that left his refinery traveled cheaper than theirs. It was like playing a game where only one player knew the rules and had written them in advance. By the time others realized they were bleeding, it was too late. Their customers were gone. Their margins evaporated. And then came the offer: sell or vanish. Most sold. And those who didn't, their silence would tell the story better than their words. By the end of the decade, Standard Oil controlled not just refineries, but pipelines, warehouses, barrel-making factories, rail cars, distribution hubs, and even local politicians. The company didn't exist within the oil market, it became the market. It was total integration, long before the term became fashionable. But the genius of Rockefeller was not just in domination, it was in invisibility. He created networks of subsidiaries, shell companies, front men. To the public, it looked like dozens of firms. In reality, they were all fingers of the same hand. He understood something most businessmen didn't: that true power doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It disguises itself as inevitability. Even the way he carried himself was strategic. He rarely spoke in public. He never shouted. His image was not fire, but stone, unmoving, undisturbed. Where his rivals bragged, he withdrew. Where they exploded, he absorbed. And yet behind that calm exterior was a mind of almost terrifying discipline. He woke at the same time every day, ate the same meals, kept the same books, prayed the same prayers. The order he imposed on his company began in himself. He didn't tolerate waste, not in his factories, not in his ledgers, not in his soul. But that same devotion to structure also meant he saw people as variables. Employees were lines on a spreadsheet. Rivals were inefficiencies. Governments were distractions. He was not cruel, he was cold. By the 1880s, Rockefeller had built the most powerful private company in the world. And yet, he feared the public would not understand. So he disguised the scale of his power. In 1882, he pioneered a new structure, the Standard Oil Trust. It allowed him to bundle dozens of companies into one invisible body. Legal ownership spread across states, across layers, across proxies. The average citizen didn't know where one company ended and another began. And that was the point. He had become too big to trace, too quiet to blame. But not everyone remained silent. One of them was a woman named Ida Tarbell. Her father had been crushed by Standard Oil. Years later, she would spend months researching every detail of the company's structure, every deal, every pattern of manipulation. Her exposé would peel back the mask Rockefeller had spent a lifetime building. The public reaction was sharp, but Rockefeller remained unmoved. He had already begun stepping back from day-to-day operations, retreating into philanthropy, donating millions to medicine, science, education, and religion. To many, this was redemption. To others, it was laundering. But the deeper question lingered, not in the headlines, not in the courts, but in the minds of those who looked around and saw a world quietly molded by one man's vision. Was Rockefeller simply efficient, or was he something else entirely? Because when power becomes invisible, it also becomes untouchable. And that, more than wealth, more than fame, is the most terrifying kind of empire. By the time the US government decided to act, it was already too late. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil must be broken up under antitrust law. The ruling was declared a victory for fairness, a stand against monopoly. But in practice, it changed little. The pieces of Standard Oil didn't vanish. They evolved, splitting into entities that would later become Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and others. Rockefeller didn't lose money. His wealth multiplied. The market wasn't liberated. It was reorganized. And he had already stepped back into the shadows. He lived another quarter century, spending his days walking in quiet gardens, attending church, writing checks to universities and hospitals. He was photographed smiling, feeding birds, handing out nickels to children. Time blurred the memory. The tycoon became a grandfatherly myth. The man who once controlled the arteries of a nation's economy now seemed harmless, even kind. But legacies don't die with the man. They metastasize. Rockefeller gave away hundreds of millions of dollars. His philanthropic institutions transformed education, medicine, public health. But even these gifts bore his signature belief that power must be centralized, that systems must be engineered from the top down. He didn't donate freely. He invested in influence. And the model he pioneered, of total integration, of invisible control masked by public service, became a blueprint. Not just for corporations, but for governments, for modern philanthropy, for the global economy itself. Today we speak the language he wrote: efficiency, consolidation, streamlining, scale, words that sound clean, words that sound rational. But beneath them lies something else, a philosophy that sees chaos as a sin and control as salvation. You can find his fingerprints in every boardroom that owns its supply chain, in every platform that controls its own traffic, content, and audience, in every quiet handshake between industry and government, wrapped in the language of innovation. He didn't just change business. He changed how we think power should look: quiet, clean, inevitable. And perhaps the most chilling part is not what he did, but how much of it we've learned to admire. Because when a man builds a system so complete, so stable, so untouchable, we stop questioning it. We stop seeing it. We just live inside it. And maybe that's the true mark of empire, not the crown, not the armies, but the silence. The kind of silence that surrounds a structure no one dares disturb, because it looks so much like order,